So, let's be honest. What chance did a woman really have in a naval courtroom? A courtroom where the laws were written by men who thought a woman on a pirate ship was basically an abomination, an affront to the natural order of things. If you look at the historical records, the answer is bleak. She had practically zero chance. Mercy wasn't really on the table for female pirates. You see, during the so-called Golden Age of Piracy in the 17th and 18th centuries, the British authorities had no patience for pirates of any kind. But for them, a female pirate had broken two sets of sacred rules, not just the law of the crown, but the unspoken laws of what a woman was supposed to be. Their trials were often a sham, held in makeshift courts in port cities, run by governors or naval captains who had already made up their minds. These weren't trials by a jury of your peers. They were instruments of imperial power, and the verdict was a foregone conclusion. The whole process was brutally quick, but it had its own dark sense of theater. They'd haul in merchant captains and naval officers to testify. Sometimes they'd even put a captured crewmate on the stand who'd say whatever he needed to say to avoid the noose himself. The accused had almost no legal rights. Take Anne Bonny and Mary Red, the most famous female pirate duo in history. When they stood trial in Jamaica in 1720 and were sentenced to death, Anne Bonny had nothing but scorn for her lover, Calico Jack. Her famous last words to him were, "If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." Ouch. Their only real defense was a wild legal longshot known as pleading the belly, claiming they were pregnant. And incredibly, it worked, at least for a while. It was one of the very few protections the law offered women. But Bonny and Reed were the exception. Most other women just faced their accusers in silence, knowing they were judged guilty the moment they stepped off the ship. And if the verdict was guilty, which it almost always was, your next stop was often a place called Execution Dock. Imagine the scene. The Thames River is flowing peacefully through London, but the silence is shattered by the roar of a crowd. This was the Empire's grand theater of payback. This is where pirates, men and women, met their end, swinging from a rope over the very water that once gave them their freedom. Piracy was a capital crime, and the authorities made it clear, if you live by the sea, you'll die by the sea. And don't think for a second that women were given some sort of delicate treatment. The execution was a full-blown ritual of public humiliation. They'd be dragged from prison, paraded through the streets in a cart while crowds jeered, and then placed under the gallows. And the method? Yeah, it was brutal. They used a short drop, which didn't snap your neck. It was designed for a slow, agonizing death by strangulation, a horrifying spectacle nicknamed the Marshal's Dance. While we don't have as many records of women being executed this way, it absolutely happened. A woman named Mary Critchett, captured off the American coast in 1729, was tried in Virginia. The court found her guilty, and she was hanged, swiftly. No delays, no last-minute pardons, no pregnancy to save her. This wasn't just punishment. It was a message, a terrifying one. For the most infamous pirates, they'd even leave the body hanging in a metal cage, a practice called gibbeting, until 3 high tides had washed over it. It was a gruesome warning to anyone, especially any woman, even thinking about a life of piracy. In the shadow of the gallows, their legends died, and they became nothing more than a cautionary tale. But the rope wasn't the only punishment. Before the gallows, there was often the whip. Flogging was a standard agonizing practice used to inflict both pain and public shame. For a woman, it was a performance of degradation. Her body became a canvas to display the consequences of rebellion. The tool of choice was the cat-o'-nine-tails, a nasty whip with knotted cords designed to literally tear flesh from bone. A sentence could be anything from a dozen lashes to a few hundred, which was often a death sentence in itself. And of course they did it in public, on the docks, or in the town square, for everyone to see. This was about breaking someone, body and soul. For the authorities, it sent a clear message. A woman who dared to wield a sword and command men would be brought low, violently reminded of her place. Her blood on the cobblestones was a promise that the old rules would be enforced with merciless force. This wasn't justice. This was control. But not everyone was hanged or flogged. For some women, especially women of color, the fate was something else entirely. A quiet disappearance. See, in the Spanish and Portuguese colonies, the lines between piracy, privateering, and slavery were incredibly blurry. If you were a black or indigenous woman on a captured pirate ship, you often weren't even seen as a pirate. You were seen as property. We have records from port cities showing that when a ship was captured, the people on board were simply inventoried like cargo and sold. Any woman of color was often just assumed to be an escaped slave. They'd be absorbed right back into the brutal machine of the plantations or forced to become servants or concubines for colonial officials. Their past as a pirate was just erased. The empire's ledgers rarely bothered to distinguish between a female pirate and a female slave. And that silence in the records tells its own story. For these women, their story didn't end with a verdict. It ended with a bill of sale. And finally, there's maybe the grimmest fate of all. Not a quick, violent death, but a slow one. Fading away out of sight on a rotting prison ship. These were decommissioned warships, floating dungeons left to decay in harbors. They were a cheap and easy way to deal with overflowing prisons. Life on these hulks was a living hell. Inmates were chained below deck in damp, dark, crowded holds. Disease, typhus, dysentery, smallpox ran rampant. Food was scarce and often spoiled, and women on these ships were doubly vulnerable, facing not just starvation and sickness, but the constant threat of abuse from guards and other prisoners. A reality that the official reports, of course, never acknowledged. Often they were just left off the prison rolls entirely. Unrecorded, forgotten. On these silent, decaying decks, history didn't record an execution. It just recorded an absence. So when you look at all of this, the rigged trials, the public executions, the floggings, the enslavement, the slow death on prison ships, you see a pattern. This wasn't just punishment. It was a multifaceted system of terror, gendered control, and ultimately, deliberate erasure. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Whose stories get told, and whose are left to rot in silence? Let us know what you think in the comments.